we were at the point where I was talking about the somewhat homomorphic crypto system and the properties we need from that. And well, I was sort of debating a lot with myself how much detail I should do about the actual crypto system.
Because but the problem is, if I would be talking about ring LVE and how to base somewhat homomorphic encryption on that and how to do SIMD instructions, I could be doing a whole 3-hour session on just that, and that wasn't really the purpose. So I'm going to lie through my teeth and just tell you a very simplistic version of everything, which is going to be hopefully just enough for you to get why the protocol is the way it is. And then for the actual crypto system, you'll have to go and read the paper. So here's my simplistic version of the world. So in this particular system, we think of the ciphertext Z as a pair of polynomials. And there will be polynomials in the ring ZQ. The coefficients will be in ZQ. And we mod out by some very cleverly chosen polynomial F. And the idea is that Q is much larger than P, where P is the field size. And somehow the idea is here that the coefficients live in this much bigger space, and the actual plaintext values are in this smaller space, and this means we have room for adding noise intuitively to hide what the message is. So the key is, well, it's also a polynomial. Call it S with small coefficients usually. And for a ciphertext C0, C1, well, plaintext is basically you take C1, you multiply by S, you subtract from C0, you mod out with P, and this gives you a polynomial mod P, of course, and this is the plaintext. You read off the coefficients of that polynomial to get the plaintext. Right? Simple enough. The idea now to do distributed decryption in this world is we're going to split this polynomial S into additive shares, and we're going to give, each summand to a player. And now to decrypt, you can see what we are going to do is something like the following. We are going to let each player multiply his share of the key with this coefficient, well, this part C1 of the ciphertext, and add some polynomial Ti, which is such that modulo P is 0. So if you reduce all coefficients mod P, you get 0. Oh, I'm sorry. So what you did not hear was that this is a very simplistic version of the crypto system. Did anybody actually miss any of what I said? Maybe you did. Does anybody feel they're missing something? Should I rewind? This is you, so you're not allowed to rewind, right? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So where was I? So yeah, the idea is that when you decrypt, you take your share of the secret key, you multiply it by one part of the ciphertext, and you add a small amount of noise, so to speak. You make that noise be 0 mod P, because this will mean that when you add up things, the message will come out unharmed. But what you want to do is you want to hide information about the secret key. So the point is that if you add enough noise here, then your SI will be protected by this noise. So therefore it would be safe to simply just send out this thing I call DI here. And if you now add all of this, add up all this stuff and subtract from C0, then you get the same thing as what I claimed was the plaintext before. Right? So therefore this gives you, if everybody does what they're supposed to, then this will give you the correct message. And it will be secure in the sense that the adversary will not be any closer to seeing the secret key than it was before. So it's semi-secure, of course. It's of course not maliciously secure, because I mean people could just lie about this contribution, DI. It is, however, a secure implementation of a different functionality, namely a functionality that takes the ciphertext as input, decrypts, sends the message to the adversary, and allows the adversary to decide the output. Right? I mean, this is what this protocol would be doing if we allow people to be malicious. If you add in an error to it, it's just like modifying the message. This doesn't sound like much of a help, but it will still be sufficient for us. If we redesign the rest of the protocol, such that we can catch those errors that are introduced this way, then we'll still be fine. And the issue here is that the only way I would know how to make this be really maliciously secure is by adding some weird zero-knowledge proofs. And that would be absolutely horrible. I know no solution which is not horrible to this. So it's better to just live with the errors and then catch them in some way. That's, I would claim, certainly much cheaper than adding zero-knowledge proofs to this. So that means the setup assumption we're doing here is that there is a public key that's common to everybody, and everybody has shares of the secret key. It's known that if you want to do anything non-trivial and use the security for dishonest majority, then we have to have some setup assumption. This is the one I made. I should add that in the Speech 2 paper, there is in fact a protocol that will create this thing from a much weaker setup assumption for covert security. Doing it really efficiently for full active security is an open problem. Okay. Good. So here's a sketch of the preprocessing protocol. So here I'll be assuming, just for simplicity and to save on indices, that every ciphertext contains just a single field value. That's not really the case, right? I mean, the whole point is we have lots of field values, but just for notation, it's easier. So the first step is, if I'm going to play a PI, I'm going to choose AI, BI, RI in my field at random. So those are plain text values. And I'm going to broadcast the encryption of these guys. So most of the time, the corresponding capital letter is the ciphertext for that value. So I have lots of ciphertexts, and there's a typo because this R there should be an RI, and not just R. And he gives a zero-knowledge proof that he knows all these ciphertexts. I'll get back to what those zero-knowledge proofs are a little bit more precisely. But it's a well-known fact that the zero-knowledge proofs at least proofs that you will never get rid of in such a protocol is that people know what they contribute. Right? This is what you always have to do, because you need what is known as input independence. That the adversary cannot relate his choices to the other people's choices. The way to make sure he doesn't do that is by ensuring that he knows all the time. Everybody knows what they contribute. Okay, so now everybody just add up the A's and the B's. So we now get a ciphertext A that contains the sum of the contributions from all the players, similarly for B, and now we just multiply those two ciphertexts, right? So of course, if I define A to be the sum of all the AIs and likewise with B, then D will contain A times B. It is unfortunately a noisy ciphertext because it's the result of a multiplication. So we want to do something about this, and what we do is the following. So I'm going to use distributed decryption from before to decrypt D minus R. And so here there is in fact actually another typo because this R here is supposed to be the sum of RIs from every player. Okay? I should have had that on the slide. Okay. So the idea is that this is secure because I'm revealing A times B minus some R that nobody knows. So that's fine. That's what D is supposed to be. Of course, it might not be really because the decryption might make an error, as I said, but that's what it's supposed to be. And then finally, I'm going to set C to be R plus the encryption of this public constant D. If everything went well, then C now contains A times B, right? Because D was A times B, R is this random value, D is supposed to be A times B minus R. So R cancels out and be A times B. Why is this gymnastics useful? Well, because now C is actually a fresh ciphertext almost, right? It's not a multiplication ciphertext. It's a fresh ciphertext. And there's another advantage, namely that if P1 outputs, but now people generate outputs, and those outputs are basically those random shares that they have, that they didn't measure themselves. And the first player is going to output A1, B1, and C1, which is R1 plus D. All other PIs, they just output AI, BI, and a CI, which is the RI. Why does this make sense? Well, if you add all the A's, this is what we say, if you add all the A's, you get A. If you add all the B's, you get B. If you add all the C's, you'll see if you do the math, that we get A times B. If everything was fine, that is. If the adversary introduced an error in this decryption we did, it will not, the CIs will not sum to C, but to C plus some error that the adversary chose. Okay. This is, of course, a problem. We want to make correct multiplication triples, so we're going to have to deal with this error later on. But so far, at least, we have well-defined shares. Right? Which are well-defined because there are ciphertexts out there that define them. Okay. So far, so good. It looks a little bit like a representation already, right? We have A, B, and C. It's supposed to be C, 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 B. We still need the max though, right? For later. So how do we do this? Well, so this is step 0 here. Once and for all, we're going to create an encryption. That's going to go K for key of some alpha, which is supposed to be random and known by nobody. We just do this as in the previous slide. Everybody generates a random contribution, and we add up, and people prove that they know what they contribute. And this, by the way, also automatically creates an additive sharing of alpha, right? So that's already fine. So now, suppose we have a ciphertext X that encrypts little x, where X could be any of these A, B's, and C's from the previous slide. We want to compute additive shares in the MAC on X. That's what we need for the representation later on, right? Okay, so it's very much the same trick as before. So each player PI is going to choose some value SI at random, broadcast encryption of this thing, which is in knowledge knows the plaintext. Okay, and now we compute the sum of all these S guys, that's going to be called S, and we also compute K times X. This makes sense, right? Because K contains the key, X contains the data, so now K times X contains the MAC. Okay? So now we use distributed decryption to decrypt K times X minus S, and the result we get is called D, and that's actually alpha times X minus S, plus maybe an error again, because maybe the adversary messes up this decryption. And the idea is that, of course, now we're going to use this public constant to modify S and the shares of S into shares of the MAC. And this is done exactly the same way as in the previous slide. So P1 is going to output a share M1, which is computed as S1 plus D. Everybody else just outputs an MI, which is SI. So if you add up these things, then, well, the original SIs, they sum to S. D supposedly is alpha X minus S. So this makes alpha X, except maybe there's an error. Okay? So, you know, it's pretty much the same principle as before. Well, the nice thing is, this error we actually don't have to deal with. I claim this doesn't matter. Why? Well, because we already showed that the MAC is secure even if the adversary adds an error to the MAC. I don't care if he adds it already in the preprocessing. It's still going to be secure, as long as the error is chosen in a way so you don't know the message or you don't know the key, which he doesn't. So this is actually fine. Okay. So in this way, we now have things in the correct format, syntactically. So we have A, B's, and C's with max, but we're not sure that C is A times B, so we have to make sure that this really is the case. So I'm going to try to explain things here just in terms of things you already know from before. So let's say we have a representation of this double bracket form of a random value that nobody can predict, but which we can open reliably. I mean, in an implementation where there is also encryption around, you might not have to do it this way, but let's just, you know, take the same terms as before. So the idea is that we will do the following test. I'm just going to describe the test for one triple. In reality, what we can do is test lots of triples in parallel and use the same random value T for all of them. Okay? Good. So I'm going to take another one, just as unreliable triple XYZ, and then we're going to do kind of, sacrifice and conquer, if you will. So we will use this triple to test the other guy, but then sacrifice the triple we sort of the auxiliary triple we will sacrifice. So we open this random T, and then what we're going to do is we're going to partially open T times A minus X. Right? This is going to be secure because well, A is masked completely by, or T times A is masked completely by X. And B minus Y is also secure because B is masked by Y. And one thing is called U, the other one is called V. And then we partially open this thing here, this weird linear combination. So T times C in the box, minus Z, minus V times X, minus U times Y, minus U times V. Well, I'm not going to do it here, but if you plug in what U and V are and just do the math, you will find out this should be 0. Okay. So the thing is, once again, this is one of these nice tests where there's no possibility for these selective failure attacks that was haunting Claudio yesterday. Because here we know what the results should be. And it turns out we will also know that if there was an error, the result's going to be abort, except with very small probability, because what you can show is that, okay. So, of course, we have to check max for all the partial openings. So this is done by just the same protocols in the online part. So, I mean, we have to know that the partial openings did the right thing. Okay. Now, the point is, if AB is not C, what you can show is this test only goes true for a single value of T. There's only one value that makes it work. Or if the MAC check fails. And both of these things happen to probability 1 over P. And notice that of course, here, this is just like with Claudio's preprocessing yesterday. It doesn't matter if we reveal information about these secret values in case we have to abort, because then the whole game is over anyway. And they're not even any inputs here we have to protect. Yeah, so this is how it works. Yeah, it's the same proof as with the max essentially. If you assume that AB minus C is not 0, then if you assume that this equation that you test, that this thing is 0, is satisfied, you get an equation that determines the value of T uniquely, because AB minus C is not 0, and therefore you essentially have to guess T to make this equation work out, but you can't because T was not known when these values were fixed. Okay? Yes? Good. So this means, yeah, we sacrifice a constant fraction of the terms. We sacrifice half of them, but then as a reward, we get that the ones we keep are actually reliable, except with this very small probability. Okay. So what about these zero-knowledge proofs? Well, the basis of it is not really very clever, because I'm just going to use the design pattern that everybody is using for this sort of thing, I guess. So the idea is, some guy has created a ciphertext C. He wants to convince us that it's well formed, and he knows the plaintext. So what's happening is the proof is going to make an auxiliary random ciphertext A. There's a random challenge bit that's chosen by a verifier V, and if B is 0, you just open A, which means you reveal plaintext, you reveal randomness. If B is 1, you have to open C plus A. I mean, surprise, surprise. I mean, if you've seen zero-knowledge proofs before, this is what we do all the time, isn't it? I mean, if you want to prove that some object is good, what you do is you create another random object of the same type, and then you're challenged to either open the auxiliary thing or some combination of the auxiliary thing and your real thing, right? Yeah, you can use some standard techniques to choose a challenge that all players trust is random, so you really don't have to give, proof individually to each other player. You can just do one proof that everybody will be happy about. Because everybody just needs to trust that challenge was actually random and could not have been predicted by the prover. Okay, it turns out that, and here I'm sweeping things under the rug to an alarming extent, but if you choose A with the proper distribution, then it turns out that opening C plus A is going to reveal nothing about C. So intuitively, the proof is still annoying. A little bit more technically, what is happening is, so a simulator, what it would do would be the usual thing. I'm gonna do things in the opposite time order. So I'm going to create the thing that you open first as a random ciphertext that I created myself, so I know how to open it. And then I'm going to choose the random bit. And then I'm going to choose, as a result of what I know how to answer, and the challenge bit, I'm going to create something to play the role of the auxiliary ciphertext A. And the property you need is that the distribution of this thing I end up with, it will be either A itself, or what you chose, or what you chose plus ciphertext C. So if you make sure that those two have almost the same distribution, then you're fine. So what turns out is a matter of, well, you have to make this A there has to be made with enough noise in it, so that when you add C, you get almost the same distribution. Then things are fine. I hope that makes some kind of sense. Yes?
How many do we need to do? Do we need to do vertices? You are using a vertex.
Yeah, so you shouldn't be misled by it. So it's not quite as bad as it looks, because you have to remember that each ciphertext actually contains tons of values. So I'm not doing a serialized proof per triple. I'm only doing one for each ciphertext, and each ciphertext contains lots of values in parallel, right? I'm sort of not. This is what I said in the real crypto system. Ciphertexts contain a whole tuple of values. So if there are S of those inside a ciphertext, I'm actually making S triples in parallel here, right? So I'm doing one serialized proof for each ciphertext, but per triple you have to divide by S to get the effort per triple. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Right. Yes.
Also so far you only needed homomorphic property, one addition and one multiplication, so you could do that with possibly like a linear map scheme. The only reason you're using the linear assumption is for, the LWE assumption is for this efficiency?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, I don't need very much homomorphism here. I just need some additions and one multiplication. This is all I will need. So Abe was saying, but there are simple ways of doing that. But what you don't get in quite a simpler way, what you don't get unless you use ring assumptions and stuff like this, is you get this parallels, which is crucial to the efficiency actually. Okay. Well, also, so by homomorphic property, if the prover could answer both questions, so we can open both the auxiliary thing and also C plus the auxiliary thing, he can also open C plus A minus A, which is C. So soundness error is 1/2. Now, of course, we don't want to just repeat this. That's going to be way too inefficient. But it turns out there are some amortization techniques by myself and Kramer from Bar-Ilan, and there's also, by the way, recently a journal version coming out of this where Marcel Keller is also a co-author. And the idea here is that if I have a whole bunch of ciphertexts, which I do actually, and I want to prove something for all of them, it's the same proof I'm doing in parallel for all of these guys, I can actually do all these at a much smaller amortized cost than I would have to pay if I repeated each proof individually. That technique is also a longer story that I don't think I have time to talk about in detail, but the idea is that you can actually get almost the same effect as if just one iteration of the proof gave you negligible soundness error. If you do this thing for, let's say, security parameter value ciphertexts in parallel. Okay? Yeah, it sounds bad, but the serialized proof that has error 1/2, but it's not so bad in practice because we're doing this so many times. Okay. Good. So, is it secure? Well, first of all, here's the preprocessing. Well, it's a very simplified version of the preprocessing functionality. What is it doing? Well, it wants to make lots of representations, right, of the right form. So what it does is, this is how I define it. It gets from the adversary. So what is it? The shares that corrupt players should have. I'll talk more about this in a moment. Given those shares, which of course don't determine the secret, it chooses, the data inside the thing at random, and then it chooses shares for the honest players at random as well, such that the sum is correct. Okay? So the idea is that I get an unqualified set of shares for corrupt players from the adversary. I choose my secret freely, and I choose the shares for the honest players to match this. Then I output that to the honest players. Right? Now, this is actually, this might seem weird, right? Because the first thing you think of, if you have to specify a functionality for this, is well, of course, I mean, the functionality just does everything by itself, right? Choose a value, secret share it, give out shares. That's, I mean, come on, how hard can it be? The thing is that you actually risk, if you do that, to get a functionality you cannot implement. The problem is, there must be a simulator that makes a simulated version of the protocol that generates these shares. Now, of course, inside that protocol, the adversary has influence over which shares he gets, right? I mean, the corrupt players choose their ciphertexts with their shares in it. So, if on the other hand, the functionality insists on, I want to choose all the shares, it doesn't really match, does it? Right? It means that you get a protocol conversation that doesn't match with what the random choices that the functionality made. This can actually be a problem. Yes?
Do you need setup for the preprocessing? Like some trusted setup to do the preprocessing?
Yes. So the question was, do I need setup? I mentioned this earlier a little bit. So the setup I need is this public key setup. So I'm assuming from the beginning there's a public key, and people have shares in the secret key. That's the setup I need. Yeah, so this is just, so I think it's a general thing that's worthwhile remembering here, that both the curse and the strength of the UC model is when you specify functionality, you get exactly what you specify. And sometimes you get more than you bargained for. Right? If I would specify a functionality saying the functionality chooses the secret and all the shares, this means I'm actually demanding of an implementation that the corrupt players do not have any control over their shares. They must be randomly chosen. Right? That's what it says. But then we say, come on, this is not necessary, right? We just want to protect the secret. That must be randomly chosen. Who cares about the shares that the corrupt players have? So to specify that, then what I do is I say the adversary can say what shares he wants, and then the functionality does the rest. This you can implement. Okay? Good. So the simulator, very roughly speaking, does the following. So what he does is, first of all, he does the setup. This is the same thing as before. We assume that this functionality is already there. It doesn't have any inputs anyway, so we'll just execute the thing. So we generate a public and a secret key. We make shares in the secret key, and we send corrupt players their shares. This is fine. This looks just like what you would have seen in real life. And now you simulate. You simply follow the protocol. It's not so hard here. I mean, there are no inputs, right? People just get outputs. Yeah. So we just follow the protocol, and whenever a corrupt player sends a ciphertext, we know what's inside because we just decrypt, right? We can decrypt because he must prove to us that they're well formed, so we can decrypt. Okay? So we know their shares. We send those to F, the functionality, and this is all legal UC simulation because we don't have to rewind. Right? Okay. So this is roughly what happens. And of course, there's the usual thing where if you have to abort if checks don't match up and stuff. But this is essentially what it is. So pictorially, we have this kind of thing. So here's the environment, the functionality for preprocessing, the simulator just like before. So what's happening if we start from the top here? First, you do the key generation and you share the secret key. You send shares the secret key for the corrupt players to the environment. You then do the simulated protocol, which basically means lots of ciphertext and serialized proof is going back and forth here. And to do this, we just start this dummy copy of the honest players. That's easy in this case. There's no input. We don't have to have a dummy input because there are no inputs. And so once we know what the corrupt players sent, what ciphertext they sent, then we can decrypt and we can send the shares for the corrupt players to the functionality. Okay? And then the functionality will do this business of choosing the values and sending the shares to honest players up there, if there's no more. Okay, so does this work? It seems it's fine, right? I mean, I'm simulating the protocol by following the protocol exactly. What's not to like? This must be good. Or is it? I mean, there is a catch, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be asking the question this way. So this is, I mean, the simulation is fine, but this is not the argument. So I'm claiming that there is actually, potentially there might be a way for the environment to distinguish if this is all I say. Any ideas for why this, for what I have to take into account as well?
Is there a beer prize?
For you, there's always a beer, Claudia. You see, the question was, is there a beer? Yes, there is a beer. And now Claudia doesn't want to be seen as being cheap, and now he feels an obligation to keep quiet even if he knows the answer. Probably does. Okay, so the problem here is, well, the issue is, well, it's snooping. It's the functionality that chooses the shares for the honest players, right? As simulated, we don't know the shares for the honest players. Of course, we're not supposed to know those. But we simulated ciphertext supposedly from the honest players. So it means that the ciphertext we simulate contain garbage. Right? So what I'm saying is that there is, syntactically, there is a mismatch between these shares for honest players that the environment is seeing and those ciphertexts it's seeing in the simulation. So there's a difference there. Okay, then you say, okay, who cares? Difference is only inside ciphertext, so if we just say CPA security of encryption scheme, we're fine. We're done. Are we done? No, we're not done. Why are we not done?
Sorry, but I thought we changed the functionality so that it doesn't give the shares, right? Like, it doesn't generate the randomness for the share.
Maybe I can come back to this afterwards. So, just to finish this point. So I cannot, from this setup, just argue that we are done just based on CPA security of the crypto system. There's a very good reason for this. So who knows the secret key in this setup here? That's on the screen. The simulator, yeah, the simulator knows the secret key, right? It just generated the thing itself. So in this setup, I mean, the guys who want to prove something, we know the secret key, so of course we cannot argue by CPA security that there's no reduction here, because we know the secret key, so that doesn't really work. So it means we have to build a reduction that somehow proves that it's indistinguishable, but without knowing the secret key. We'll get back to this in a moment. Okay, can you repeat your question?
I was under the impression that the shares from the functionality doesn't have randomness to generate the shares. So you're going to change the functionality.
So maybe I can answer the question by saying more precise. So what the preprocessing functionality does is it gets these shares for the corrupt players, and then it has randomness itself. It chooses the secret, and then it chooses shares for the honest players. Now, if there's more than one honest player, even that requires randomness. Right? So it is not always true that even if you fix this, that would have to fix, and the secret that would have fixed just for the honest players. So there is something to argue here. Okay, so how do we build a reduction like this? Well, yeah, so this is the point in simulation. We know the secret key, so we can't appeal to security directly. So here's his a recap of the situation. So the environment sees the shares of A in the box that honest players output, as well as the ciphertext that's in the protocol. In the real process, those ciphertext contains the actual shares of the honest players. In the ideal process, they contain unrelated values that's chosen by the simulator. This shouldn't matter if the encryption system is EPA. That intuition is true. That shouldn't matter if the encryption system is secure. So here's an idea for reduction. So now we still simulate, but we do it differently. So we get a public key, and then so think of we play the CPA Oracle game. So we get a public key, and then we can ask for either those kinds of ciphertexts or those kinds of ciphertexts. So what we do is we say, okay, either give me challenge ciphertexts that have unrelated garbage in them, or give me ciphertexts that have these shares in them. And I get one of either kind, and I have to tell which one I got. So the idea is to build a protocol simulation that will be simulation in one case and be real thing in the other case. So I can almost do this. So I do the same thing as a simulator, except that now I'm going to use these challenge ciphertexts to play the roles of the honest player ciphertext. Of course, this means now I can't do the serialized proofs for these guys in the same way as before, but I can just do the serialized simulator. So that's okay, because that generates essentially the same transcript. I also want to extract plaintext from the corrupt player ciphertexts, but that's I can't just decrypt anymore because now I don't have the secret key. But that's okay because I can just use these things are proofs of knowledge. So there's an extractor that allows me to actually get those plaintexts out. This is important to state, I think, if you haven't seen UC framework before. This uses rewinding, of course. Right? I'm rewinding to extract, I'm also rewinding to simulate. Now people will shout at me and say, you can't do this is UC security. I have to say, yes I can. Because UC just says, there must be no rewind instruction in the simulator's code. It says nowhere that there must be no rewinding in the reduction that shows that the simulator works. That's perfectly legal. This I can do. So of course, probably if I was doing adaptive security, this could be somewhat problematic because if someone is corrupted and now I want to rewind past that corruption, then I'm probably in trouble. But I have static corruption, so I don't care. Okay? So this is sometimes hard to get your head around, but in fact there's no problem here. Yes?
General question. We're using zero knowledge to prove proofs of knowledge, that for every topic of the impact is a reason. You can't assume a thing regarding the correctness of the map. They're using two triples to bind away. If anyway using zero knowledge, you can't do the same sort of thing to have zero knowledge proofs for that.
Okay, so I think the question was, can you, this triple checking I was doing, I was sacrificing one triple to check another one, so I lose half. And I think the question was, is there a better way of doing this? There is, to some extent. Okay, for large fields, I don't know anything better than this. At least not something that's I lose a constant fraction, right? And maybe that tricks to make this constant be smaller, but for big fields, I don't know anything that's really much better. For small fields, it's a bigger problem. Because the error probability of this check that consumes one triple is 1 divided by field size. So if the field is small, this can be really expensive. This thing, there's ways around. But for big fields, I don't really know how to improve this thing. Yes.
Even the first part, signal simulator will also require rewinding.
Yes. So there's rewinding in two places here. For the simulation, and there's also for the extraction. Okay, but this should be fine. And then the idea. So what is somehow hinted at here is that. Now I show this to the environment who is trying to distinguish, and then distinguishing between simulation and real-life protocol is essentially the same as distinguishing between these two kinds of tuples of ciphertext. So if I'm doing this exactly, I'm going to have to do a hybrid proof over all the ciphertext in the protocol, essentially. There are smarter ways of doing this that will give you a tighter reduction. It's a little bit more technical, and I might have time to talk about. Okay, so let me just hint at that. So I don't have a slide for this, but the point is, first of all, this big hybrid proof. So the problem with doing this sort of thing is that, well, I'm saying if the environment can distinguish this with this advantage epsilon, I want to show that I could distinguish ciphertext for the crypto system with also a big advantage. But unfortunately, my advantage, the attack I can do on the crypto system, is going to be advantage divided by number of ciphertexts in the protocol if I do it this way. So that it gives me a rather weak conclusion, perhaps, on the crypto system. To get around this, what you can do is something like the following. So you have, there's a way to slightly trick the crypto system in such a way that you get two kinds of public keys. One kind of public key is just perfectly normal. You encrypt, you can decrypt. But you can also make noisy or meaningless public keys, where if I encrypt, the ciphertext has no information whatsoever on the plaintext. And the idea is that these two different kinds of public keys are indistinguishable. So I can make a reduction to that indistinguishability alone, instead of indistinguishability on single plaintexts. And the way one does this is I get a public key. I have to tell you whether it's meaningless or meaningful, let's say. So what I do is, I do essentially what's on the slide there, this simulated thing, using this public key. The point is, now I do the encryption, right? I only have the public key, so I can encrypt whatever I want. Therefore, I can choose to encrypt garbage in the honest player ciphertext, or I can choose to encrypt their real shares. So therefore, I can, at will, in this way, make something that looks like simulation or looks like real life protocol. This depends on my choice, and I can do this whatever public key I get. Now the point is, if I get a real public key, I will be doing something that really is very close to either simulation or real protocol. But if I get a meaningless public key, I will be making something that can't be distinguished. Information theoretically can't be distinguished because there's no information about the plaintext I chose. So therefore the experiment will be, I'll flip a coin. When I get this public key, I have to say it is meaningless or meaningful. I'll flip a coin. I will, decide, make that coin decide, do I make simulation, do I make real life? I'll make a conversation. So the adversary has to tell me, what did I choose, right? Now, if I got a meaningless key, he can't guess that. A meaningful key, he can't guess it either, therefore. Because otherwise he could tell the difference between meaningful and a meaningless key. Make sense? Kind of, I hope. So that's how you get a tighter reduction in this way, because many systems come with meaningless, meaningful keys already, and if they don't, you can always make them have something like this by redefining the proper key site. Okay. So, yes, implementation, well, the thing is that basically the number of public key operations you have to do here is quadratic in number of players, divided by S, where S is the number of field elements that you pack in one ciphertext. That's about 12,000 in one implementation that we had. And the latest implementation I know of, it's got 3 players on the LAN, security similar to 2000-bit RSA. Not impressive, I guess, but we spend maybe 10 milliseconds amortized time to prepare for one secure multiplication of 64 bits for 3 players. If you do covert security with 10% probability to cheat, you go down to about 5 milliseconds. So again, I suspect very much this can be improved substantially, but again, there hasn't been that much implementation effort on low-level speeds. There's been lots of implementation efforts on using speeds for various cute things, but I think that there's lots of work needed there to do better at the low level. Okay.
So I have a question. So is it that this lossy encryption property, is that necessary for your reduction or just an improvement in the reduction parameters?
It's not, no. I mean, the hybrid proof over every ciphertext works fine. It's just that to get a tighter reduction, it's advantageous to do this. And you can always, I mean, if you give me any somewhat homomorphic crypto system, I could always redefine the encryption procedure by saying I'm going to make an encryption containing a random bit be part of the public key. And now to encrypt, I multiply my plaintext into that ciphertext and randomize this. This will give me the property, right? Because if this extra ciphertext contains a 0, that's a meaningless key. Otherwise, it's a meaningful key. So this is not much extra cost for you. So you can always assume this.
Well, then you need to increase the depth of the SHE, right, to 2.
Not really, because I'm multiplying by constant. I mean, so I'm okay. So again, I'm having this extra ciphertext in the public key that contains 0 or 1. So now when I encrypt something, for me, what I encrypt is a known constant. Instead, I have to multiply into that ciphertext. So that doesn't generate that much extra. It's much less than if I was multiplying 2 ciphertexts. Right? So that's not so bad, actually.
But in general, you're not optimizing the tightness of the reduction here. You're not giving a concrete. Why go through all of that to improve the tightness of one aspect of the reduction, but in other aspects you'll be using right?
Well, so the question is, why am I so keen on making the reduction tighter?
This particular run, right? Because you'll be doing you'll be losing factors in other parts of your security group, or no? Did I miss it?
Oh, so, okay, so why am I so keen on making this be tight if I'm losing in other places? I don't think I am, actually. Because the proof I was hinting at before here, that's really the only place where some assumption is used. The other stuff is like, yeah, there is a loss in terms of actually not. No. I mean, the properties of the zero knowledge things are statistical. So I don't think I lose anything else, actually. Okay. So now for something else. So if you look at all these protocols, the online protocol I've shown you, basically has this 1 over field size error probability. So there's a typo. It's fine. So the online phase I showed you is optimal for fields where 1 over field size is comparable not to 2 minus k, but 2 to the minus k, where k is a security parameter. Right? So for small fields, what can I do? Fill 2 elements. Well, the naive answer is, well, of course, 1 MAC is not enough, because then, I mean, if I do just 1 MAC over that field, that can be treated with probability 1/2. This is not good. So what do? I just have many MACs, right, with independent keys. That will work. But now I need k independent MACs, right? So it means that 1 field element now turns into a string of k field elements. So this gives me, complexity of circuit size times security parameter, not circuit size. So it's obvious to try to do better than this. And the idea is here to say, well, you can actually do Boolean circuits and small field circuits with almost constant overhead. This is what was known as the Minimac protocol, the nickname. And the idea is to say, well, if we could do the Boolean circuit by doing only blockwise operations, say we could do that. Somehow there's ways to compute this Boolean circuit by just taking a block of k bits and add it to another block of k bits, or taking a vector of k bits and multiply it component-wise with the other vector. So the idea was that then these blocks would be our data unit. And hopefully it might be cheaper to authenticate such a block than it would be to authenticate a single bit. So the reason why this is not totally nonsense is because there is this result by me and Ishai and Koiber from Eurocrypt 210, where one of the things we say is, if you take a Boolean circuit, you can restructure it, well, not Boolean, arithmetic in general, you can restructure it such that you really only need these blockwise operations. You also need, the only additional thing you need is you need a small number of permutations inside blocks. So of course, I mean, it's not total magic, but you do need to be able to rearrange bits inside blocks. But the point is that the permutations you don't need very many different permutations to do this. And the price you pay is a logarithmic blow up in size of circuit. Okay, so this is just to convince you that I'm not totally dreaming here. That there might be hope for this, actually. More concretely, what we do is the following. So here's a new authentication scheme. It's going to look a lot like the old authentication scheme, but there will be differences. Okay, so the secret value is once again now a bit string, x, which is once again additively shared. So now plus means just bitwise XOR, right? So x is x1 plus x2, and these are the shares. The new thing is now x must be in some error correcting code C. So it's a vector, it must be a code word, in other words. That's the demand. The MAC looks a lot like it was before. So there is a random alpha, which is the key to random bit string. And the MAC once again is the product of the data x with the key, except that it is now the bitwise product. Or the Schur product, as some people would call this. Yes? And once again, we added some secret share this time. Okay? And just like before, deal with issues shares alpha 1 alpha 2 through the player, such that when you XOR together, you get the key alpha. So the main new thing is now what you authenticate, or at least what you directly authenticate, must be a code word and some good error correcting code C. And the MAC you do is the bitwise product of the key and X. Okay, why is this a good idea? Well, so now that this is what the representation looks like, and the idea is that when we open, we check, not only do we check the MAC, we also check that X is a code word. Should be easy. Now, why would this be secure? Well, think of it this way. What we're doing when we do this bitwise product of alpha with X is really that we're doing many 1-bit MACs in parallel. Right? This is what is happening. So I take the first entry in X, I multiply this by 1 key bit, this becomes a MAC. I take the next entry in X, I multiply by 1 key bit, this becomes a MAC 2. And of course, each individual MAC is hopelessly insecure. It can be cheated with probability 1/2. But the point is that if the adversary wants to cheat, he has to replace the real X by a different code word. Yes? And of course, that code word, if C is a good code with large minimum distance, that code word has to differ from the original one in many positions. So that means to really cheat, you have to cheat not one 1-bit MAC, but many 1-bit MACs, where many means minimum distance of the code. So this means, again, you have to guess many unknown key bits to cheat. So it's still secure if C is a good code. The overhead, well, of course, I have to be honest and say, what I'm really authenticating shouldn't be thought of as being the code word, but the data that this code word encodes. But the point is that if the code is good, has constant information rate, then that word is only a constant factor shorter than the actual code word. So I only pay constant overhead factors here. Sounds pretty good. And now, since you can see that this is syntactically so similar to what I did before with speeds, then one expects that everything will now go through in the same way, right? So this is almost true, but not quite. So here's the authentication code, the new definition of the boxes. Here's the problem. So I want to be able to multiply by constants, right? Now, what's going to happen is that if I have a public constant E, which I want to multiply by, then the MAC also gets multiplied by this constant, right? So alpha star X is the MAC. I multiply this by E. I get E times the MAC. It's alpha times E times X. So this is fine because of course this entry-wise product is commutative. So it looks like this should be, this is fine, right? This is a MAC of E times X. Well, the problem is E times X is not a code word. Even if E is a code word, nobody promises you that this bitwise product of two code words is a code word. In fact, probably it's not. So that's the problem. However, you can solve this because you can do this using the so-called Schur transform of a code. So, what you do is you have a code C, you take any pair of code words in C, you take this bitwise product of the two guys, and you take the linear span of all that. That is again a code. I mean, obviously, because it becomes a linear subspace, of course. You take a span of something. So this new code will contain all these products that I was worried about before. So even if my product is not a code word in the original code, it is a code word in this new code, C star. So that means if C star is also a good code with last minimum distance, then I'm still fine. Okay, because then I can really define the MAC on E times A. There's an extra in there. As being just this product. And now, of course, if you know that your data has been multiplied by such a constant, you should just check that the output when you open is in this C star code instead of the original C. Of course, this places demands on the code. It must have this property that both the code itself and the Schur transform must be good code, which is certainly not guaranteed always. So you need a family of good codes. Says that both C and C star have constant information and error rates, and we hope it's over a small field, ideally a constant size field. And we'd also like to check membership in C and C star efficiently, and efficient encoding into C to just be generous. This seems like lots of demands, which indeed it is, but there are constructions that achieve something like this. Not entirely, but I'll get back to sort of more precisely what you can exactly get. Okay, so yes.
So if you code C star, it depends on X and Y, right? It depends on X and Y.
Oh no. So okay. So I should have written down the definition more precisely here. So the definition of C star is you take all pairs X, Y belong in C. You do this product. Now you have a whole bunch of products, and you take the span of all these guys. That's C star. So it's a much bigger code than C, and if you're unlucky, it's the entire space. So minimum distance is really bad in that case. But think Riemann codes, right? So there are code words that are defined by polynomials of degree at most t. Now you do the Schur transform. What is that? It's defined by polynomials of degree 2t, right? Because you're doing pointwise multiplication. So if t is small enough, 2t is not too big either, so we're perfectly fine, right? So that it's not esoteric concept actually. Okay. So what about this problem of checking membership in C? So the naive approach, of course, is I just take the parasitic matrix H and I multiply by that thing. See if that's 0. It's 0 exactly if I'm in the code. That's fine. Unfortunately, so each code word contains order k data bits. So I'm just doing this parasitic matrix multiplication in a naive way. I'm going to spend quadratic time doing this, right? So I'm spending k operations per data bit, which is not good. I was hoping for much less than that. Okay, I'm taking many code words actually in the protocol, so why don't I collect them and batch check them? So I'm going to collect all my code words in the matrix A and just do the matrix part at each times A. And then I go to my basic algorithms book and look up good matrix algorithms, and you will find that there are nice recursive ways of doing this. So in other words, matrix product is not cubic, it's smaller than that. So it means that with this way, I can work predictably with this k to the d when d is smaller than 1. How small exactly is a big open problem. I mean, if you want to get famous, you have to find the optimal matrix multiplication algorithm, but that's sort of not the subject here, I guess. But also, I want it constant. I want better than this. So here's the observation. I take G, which is a generated matrix for a linear time encodable code with constant error and data rates. These things exist. That's the Spielmann code, for instance. And note, this is a different code from the C I'm talking about before. It's not the same at all. Because, for instance, the Spielmann codes, if I start doing multiplication, it's going to blow up in my face, but this is not going to work at all. But if I only want linear time encodability, constant error and data rates, then Spielmann is fine. There are lots of other things as well that will work these days. So now notice that I want to check if h times a is 0, right? Now, obviously, if I multiply from both sides by G and D transpose on the other side, I might as well check if that's 0. That's obviously the same thing. Okay. So, next step. So remember, I might as well check this. So notice the following. If H times A is not 0, well, of course, it's not clear how much non-zero it is, in the sense that the reason for it being non-zero might be there's just one and 2. But if I do this product with G and D transpose from the other side, what is happening is, well, think of it this way. Let's take H times A. And then think that it's the worst case. There's only one somewhere. Then when I multiply by D from one side, I'm essentially encoding columns in this HA thing. Now this one column where there's a 1 will now turn into a code word with lots of 1s. Okay. Then I'm multiplying by D transpose. That means now I'm encoding, you know, the rows of the result. And now there are many rows that are non-zero, so they turn into code with lots of 1s in them. So as a result of this 1 that was there before has now turned into a big block of 1s, which actually constitute a constant fraction of the whole entries, right? Because G is a code with good linear distance. Yes? So that means that now I can actually hope to check whether it's a 0 or not by just a probabilistic approach. If I sample a random entry in this big product there, either it's all zeros, I will never see a 1, or I will see a 1 with good probability, with constant probability in fact. Okay? How do I sample a random entry? Well, notice that because it's linear time encodable, I can compute D times H in quadratic time. Right? Because this just means I'm really encoding every column in H. That takes linear time for each column, so it's quadratic time total. And likewise, by just turning my head 90 degrees, I can compute A times D transpose in quadratic time. So this is the first thing I do here in my algorithm. And then what I do is now I can sample a random entry in the big product easily in linear time because I take a random row from DH, I take a random column from A times D transpose, and I do the inner product. This will be, you know, a random entry in the big product, obviously. That's 0. Do this security parameter times, and you're done. So in this way, you sample linear number of entries and check for 0, and this takes quadratic time. And actually, remember, I was doing a check on a whole matrix of code words. So I'm checking quadratic number of data bits here. I spent quadratic time, so I have constant overhead. Yes?
You're going to sample an entry. Why do you need linear time for the unity of the entire code? You're just doing a product.
Well, I'm not sure I got the question, but...
Why do you need a stream of code? Why not any linear?
Well, because, I mean, the only way I know how to do this is by first computing D times H.
You send the sample around half the bit of
Okay. So I need a full random choice of the final entry in the big product. So I need the entire matrix for this, the entire both matrices for this. So this is very nice. Now constant work per data bit. And also, this is actually, if you think about it, this is really a general algorithm for verifying matrix products in quadratic time over fields or small fields with exponentially small error probability. It was actually a coin method where you validate this thing. And in comparison, the best thing was a classic, very old algorithm by 5-outs, which gives you, in the same time, error probability 1 divided by field size, which is, of course, not impressive if the field size is 2. Yeah. So that's, for small fields, that's quite substantial improvement. Okay, so this does what we want. For checking membership of code, so we can do the authentication check efficiently. Okay, so so then there's this issue about moving data around inside blocks. Remember, I had to do this. This was part of the price I pay for being able to do only block-wise operations when I compute. Okay, so here's the more general problem. So I'm given this encoding of x. I want to get an encoding of f of x, where f is a linear function. So this is actually an even more general problem. So f is a publicly known linear function. Now, of course, I mean any function that just commutes the bits of x is certainly a linear function. Okay, so here's another instance of this. You know, I quote Claudio from yesterday. I know only one trick. If you want something like this, what you do is you pre-process a random instance of the problem, random solved instance of the problem, then you modify that into what you actually want. So what do we do here? Ideas? This is certainly not a trick question. So remember, you can have pre-processing give you whatever you want, within reason. So what should we do? Yeah, I promised a beer before. That didn't help very much, actually. Maybe it doesn't help you either.
Given it's unique, can we just do it for a random point?
Yeah, that's something like this. So since it's linear, what are we saying? So why do this? Not do this for a random point and then add up? Sure, that's what you do. So what you do is with the pre-processing supply representation of R for random R and f of R. Okay. So what do? Okay, you compute and you open x minus R. This will give you x minus R and clear, which is fine because R is random. Then everybody computes f of x minus R. This is now, I mean, there's no protocol here because we just do it on plaintext values. And now you just output, you know, this constant, public constant f of x minus R plus the box containing f of R. And of course, by linearity, this will give you f of x. You can first move f of x minus R into the box. By the way, boxes work. And now you get f of x just because f of x minus R plus f of R is f of x because f is linear. Yeah? This works just fine. And notice that in general, you might be worried about the complexity of having everybody compute f. I mean, this might seem with lots of total work, but it's not so bad because at least when f just computes the entries, because I mean everybody can compute this by himself and not spend more than constant amount of operations per bit. If you notice, this gets more complicated to write down, but if you have inputs that span across several blocks, and what f wants to do is actually do a linear function on all of those blocks simultaneously. Of course, exactly the same trick works. There's no difference there. So what that means, therefore, is there are two cases. If we know the circuit we want to compute in advance, then we can think of it as follows. The circuit we want to compute is given to us, right? So it means we can divide it up in layers, where a layer is something that a bunch of gates we can compute in parallel. Then each layer delivers outputs that go to the next layers, etc., etc. So we can, each of these guys that can be, each of the gates that can be done in parallel is fine for blockwise operations. Let's assume they're all NAND gates, let's say. So doing the computation inside the layers is fine, no problem. And then all we need to do is to rearrange the bits for the next layers. That's a known permutation. It's given when the circuit is given. So we can pre-process for that. And therefore, I'll just do this. For every layer, I'll do this, where f is a linear function that says how you rearrange the bits between each layer. So that'll be fine. So it's not known in advance. Then we can use this result from the Big Ten paper. The construction, roughly speaking, is you put something called a Bennis network between the layers of the circuit. And a Bennis network is a low-depth circuitry that will can be programmed to do any permutation that you want. And the nice thing about it is that it needs you to rearrange blocks, whole blocks. That's fine, that we can trivially do this. And then what it needs you to do inside blocks is sometimes it will ask you to say, I want to permute the bits inside blocks in this particular way. But the nice thing is, it will not ask you for too many different permutations. There are only there are only log n. So if n is the block size, there's only log n different permutations it might ask you for. Basically, we might have to take the two halves of a block and swap them, or we might have to take quarter blocks and swap them pairwise, etc., etc. So this makes for log n different permutations. So the point is, when we pre-process, we know that we won't need other permutations inside blocks than these. So therefore, it's not so hard to pre-process here either. I mean, we know what we need, even if we don't know the circuit. Of course, this comes at the cost of blowing up the circuit a little bit, but yeah. Okay. So the choice of codes. Well, so one thing I should say first is that the claim that you only pay a log factor in circuit size is true only if the circuit is well formed, as we define it. If it's not a really, really strange circuit. If it's a really strange circuit, you might have to pay an additional factor, which is related to the depth of the circuit. But I know no circuits that anybody wants to compute in real life that would have this property. It's just that I have to exclude really weird things. Anyway, it's a circuit size is S. That's what I'm going to call it. So let's say that the overhead is H. If I have to use H as computational work, communication, and storage. So that's just to define what is overhead. I mean, it means that I would like to arrive at S, computation and data and so. But if I can't do that, if I pay an extra factor H, I'll say the overhead is H. Okay? Good. So if I use Reed-Solomon codes, this is what we talked about before for the code C, then I will have, I need basically, I need n different evaluation points in my field if I do Reed-Solomon code, so I need log n bits in my field. The field has to be big enough to support different evaluation points for everybody. And here, okay, and by the way, n should be understood, this is actually a typo, n should be understood as the block size I want, not the number of players. Okay, I could, for instance, for implementations, the field with 2 to the 56 elements is a nice choice because this means that field elements are bytes, and those can be nicely addressed, individually. It turns out that the overhead will not be constant as in speeds for large fields, but we get for any field we get polylog k times log x overhead. Okay? So polylog k because I need to do encoding in Reed-Solomon codes and using fast Fourier transform, blah blah blah. I get this extra factor there. More results. I can also go to a series of papers by Kramer and other people, and they will tell you that algebraic geometry can be used to construct codes also with this multiplication property, where the field size can be constant. Okay. So this means that this polylog k factor is going to disappear, roughly. So we get only log s data and communication overhead, but you will get this weird thing, 1 plus k divided by n times log s computation overhead. The reason why you get this weird factor with 1 plus k over n is because it turns out we have to do encoding in the protocol. With these algebraic geometry codes, that's not efficient, unfortunately. But so this would give us a 1 plus k. But it turns out we can let the players share the encoding work, so we can kind of divide by n. And this is how that factor comes out. In general, if you know the circuit in advance, no Bennett's networks, no log s factor blow up, so then all those log s factors will disappear. Okay. Now, of course, there are different applications of this. For instance, if what you wanted to do with this was not to compute one function, but what you do is, say I want to compute the same function, but k times in parallel. And I can do what some people call bit slicing. So what this means is the following. So I say my block in my authentication scheme supports that I can have k values in my data vectors. Now what I can do is I can actually compute the same function independently with different inputs, k times in parallel. Because what I do is I'm going to say, well, I'm going to take the first input bit for the first instance, first input bit for the second instance, first input bit for the third instance, etc. Place all those guys in one k-bit block. That will be one data block that I can treat. Likewise, I will take another block that contains all the second input bits, and so on. And I have lots of blocks, depending on how many input bits your function takes. And now I will go through my circuit for the function, and I'll just follow the circuit completely. So if the circuit says you must take the first input bit multiplied by the second input bit, I'll just take my two data blocks and multiply them. This will, in parallel, multiply all the first input bits by all the second input bits. Yes? It just goes on like this. So it basically means you're able to replace single bits by k-bit values, but just do whatever the circuit says you should do. And there will be any need to reorganize bits inside blocks because it's just the first instance a function always stays in the first position of the block. Okay. And so if that's really what you want to do, that's really efficient. I mean, all the complexity of rearranging bits inside blocks is going to just go away. Okay, we actually tried this in real life. So in this paper from SCN, 13, 14 it should be, we did a study of using the Minimac protocol to compute lots of AES circuits in parallel. That might be something you actually might want to do, because if you have some big data string and you want to encrypt this thing in XOR mode and counter mode, let's say, I mean, a whole bunch of parallel AES compositions is exactly what you want. So what we did was we told codes over the field with 256 elements, and we did some fast Fourier transform variant to speed up the encoding in C. Yeah, here the point is, the multiplicative group in the field has order 255, which is not a 2-power, unfortunately, so we can't just use FFT as usual, but it still factors in smaller things, so we can do something similar. And then there was, okay, there's a further optimization there, because in this world, if I do the code in a straightforward way, each bit gets encoded into a byte. So if I just do exactly what I told you now, then each byte in my code word will contain only one data bit, which seems like a waste of space. It turns out that if you think a little bit about it, and you can actually exploit all 8 data bits for computation, it requires a bit more preprocessing, but not more communication, actually. So this, of course, gives you a factor 8 just like this. So what we ended up with was, in the last version I have heard about, we got 3 milliseconds amortized per AES operation, which seems to be pretty good according to other results I heard about, because it's active security, right?
How many do you have to pack into one to?
The question was how many am I amortizing over? I don't remember. Sorry, it's in the paper. So
they're all done at once. It's amortizing over. It's not preprocessing and doing individual.
Oh, so it's okay. So so we ran, I think, 3 or 4 processes in parallel. Each process was doing, one code word, things of size 1 code word. So it means that what was the data length? And I think it means one process was doing something like about 100 AES computations in parallel, something like that, order of magnitude at least. It's like 400, something like that. And there's plenty of room for optimizing this. Unfortunately, the student who did this is now on paternity leave, so I guess I can't force him to do something right now. If you know that what you want to do is AES particularly, I mean, so this can be thought of as just a case study of how to do a Boolean circuit. The Boolean circuit happens to compute AES. But if you want to specially optimize for AES, there's plenty of things you could do, because, why not preprocess an Xbox, right? I mean, it's after all only 1 byte input. So you could do something along the lines of, well, make a table that contains for every input the corresponding output, and sort of offset this table by a random offset, which you keep secret. And then when the time comes, you have this actual input here. I'm going to add this random offset, open the thing up, and look up in the table. I mean, stuff like this can be done, of course. And also, of course, what happens in between these SBOCs, the so-called subbytes operations, is linear. I can pre-process any linear operation, so why not pre-process this one? I mean, so I'm sure that this could be done much faster if you exploit the fact that you know you're doing it. But this is future work, or maybe partially ongoing work. Okay. So, yeah, of course, what you want to ask me now is so how do I implement the pre-processing from Minimac? Because this is obviously something different from what I do for speeds. There is work from Bristol. I think Marcel claims he doesn't know much about it, so maybe you shouldn't ask him. But he's at least, I mean, there is this work from Bristol where they do, as far as I understand at least, now you should correct me, Marcel, that they use the tiny OT pre-processing to get pre-processed data for both speeds and Minimac, and maybe even more. Is that roughly speaking true?
Roughly speaking, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Characteristic too.
Yes. Okay, so what Marcel is saying is that it's roughly speaking true if you constrain all this to characteristic 2 fields. Okay. How this runs, it's a very recent paper, so I don't know any implementation details there. Is there an eFriend version?
So we have started
Okay.
some code extension.
Okay,
It's to come.
I see. Okay, upcoming. Stay tuned. Don't change to another channel. Okay. I have some remarks which I think I have time for. Yeah. Okay. So here's some stuff. So for instance, this idea, must we really communicate for every multiplication gate? Is one thing you could ask yourself. So I mean, the speeds protocol, for that matter, Minimac as well, DMW, it's all the same design pattern, isn't it? We go gate by gate. We have some sharing of the inputs to a multiplication gate. Linear gates are fine, we just do the addition. Multiplication gates require communication. So we ask, in such a gate-by-gate approach, must you really communicate for every multiplication gate? Well, in honest majority setting, it's not too hard to show that if we have secret sharings of values A and B, and you want to convert this into a sharing of A times B, then if the new sharing has the same threshold as the old ones, then you must communicate to do that. Because if you didn't, you can make a two-party secure computation of the AND from scratch, which of course we know we cannot do. Now, this argument of course fails in the pre-processing model, because there we know we can do ANDs unconditionally securely. But I have some upcoming work with Jesper and Antigone, where we look at something like the following. So let's say Alice has A, Bob has value B, and say we want to achieve an additive sharing of A times B, just like we do in speeds. So this actually cannot be done even in the pre-processing model unless you communicate. If the goal is a more general sharing of, say, an output F of A times B, then you still cannot do this while communicating if F is in some sense complex enough. I'm fluffy about this because it's hard to write down exactly without saying much more, but basically where the contradiction comes from here is from the Winsler-Wulfsleger result, which I mentioned earlier. It turns out that if you could do these magic things without communicating, you end up constructing a protocol that's too good to be true according to Winsler-Wulfsleger. So that's a very short version of the story, but this is where the contradiction now comes from. So it does seem as if we stay with this design pattern we've been staying with for 20, 30 years, we are stuck with communicating size of the circuit. Yeah, so what do we do else? I don't know, but it seems that yeah, we will need something different at least. Round complexity, well, of course, I mean, we all know it's open if we can get constant number of rounds, information theoretic security efficiently. This is open even in the pre-processing model. And of course, the result above indicates there's not much to do about this if we go by the gate-by-gate approach, because I mean, if you must communicate, that's around, right? So you know, that's also stuck if we want to get constant round. Of course, I mean, I have no idea how to resolve this question, but at least it tells you that you need something else, a different protocol. If the answer was positive, you would need an entirely different protocol again. I guess what you can say about round complexity also is maybe an observation that can be interesting is that, well, of course, a protocol that computes a function, in particular computer, and you can always take a protocol and write it down as a circuit. Right? So, I mean, you take computation by each player, right? That is a circuit. If this guy sends something to this player, then you draw a wire in your circuit, etc. So if the function, I mean, as far as we know, well, there are functions that require very large depth. So that means that if you write down the protocol as a circuit, that's also a very deep circuit. It has to be the case. So it means that if there's a very small number of rounds, it means that somewhere in the round there must be these local computations that's very deep. On the other hand, I mean, what we like about unconditional secure protocols is exactly that they have these simple low-depth computations all the time. So that also indicates that if the answer was positive, that there's something, yeah. With unconditional security, there's some, we have to think of something new. And maybe it's even, how to say this? Well, if we think about, so if we say we have a protocol for multiparty computation, what that really means is we have a machinery that takes a function and outputs a protocol for computing that function. It's a protocol generator, if you will. So, you know, unless this protocol generator somehow magically could distinguish between low-depth functions and large-depth functions, if it sometimes has to specify that people must compute with very large depth, it probably do this all the time. Because if it didn't, then it would have to distinguish between low-depth functions and small-depth functions, which it probably can't, right? So it seems that maybe we actually do, in some sense at least. But this is all very fluffy, of course, but there's definitely stuff to think about here. Okay, so what else? Well, okay, the million-dollar question. Garbling schemes are protocols based on arithmetic circuits. Well, of course, I'm going to give the same fluffy answer as everybody does. It depends. But I really think it depends. I mean, if the goal is something like linear programming, which everybody has to do for benchmarking and that stuff, you want arithmetic on large integers. And of course, with speeds and the like, you get this just involving one gate involving many bits, and that can be an advantage. In particular, if the circuit has low depth even, then I think arithmetic circuits will win in many cases. If I think sugar beets, well, that's one example of a pretty big computation which was actually very low depth, because it turns out that this was lots of additions, which can be done with logarithmic depth, and then a very small number of comparisons. So that would, I think, would be a circuit that would be ideal for this sort of approach. Of course, sometimes we also want equations that are naturally binary, like comparisons, say. So what you need really to get the best of both worlds is you need to convert formats efficiently from binary to arithmetic and get the best of both worlds. And I think there might be a talk tomorrow by Michael Zona about exactly that thing. Also, I want to point out that I don't think anybody has thought about using hardware support for speech-like protocols to the extent that Abi was talking about for garbling circuits. And I can only speculate about what possibilities that might include. I think that there's tons of things to gain there. So what can I say? If you're interested in this, go for it. I think the sky's the limit. So with that, thanks.